Today's networks are changing fast, and employees, devices, and infrastructures are more distributed than ever. Gigamon Threat Insight is a cloud-native, high-velocity network detection and response solution that's purpose-built to enable you to get in front of this transformation. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Gigamon. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Complete the form, and we review those on a regular basis. The last batch we reviewed yesterday. Was that yesterday? I think it was. Yeah. It was better. It was really good. So keep those guest suggestions coming. For this segment, we're joined by Kelley Mak from WorkBench to discuss bench ventures, investment thesis, market opinion, and more. Kelley, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
Hey guys, great to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, nice to have you. Kelley, tell us a little bit about WorkBench and your role there.
Sure. So, Kelley Mak, I'm on the team at WorkBench. WorkBench is an early stage enterprise VC. We're fully based in New York, a team of 5. And WorkBench itself is a little different than your average VC fund. We actually all come from more of an IT background. So I actually used to work with Tyler at Forrester Research, and that's where I cut my teeth in the security world. And then my colleague John comes from the office of the CIO at Morgan Stanley, and my colleague Jess comes from learning and development at Cisco. And so we take more of an IT-centric lens to investing in the ecosystem, really focusing on problems rather than starting with a solution and looking for a pain point. And this allows us to be thesis-driven. And at the end of the day, we're based in New York. We're all about community. And if you think about New York, it has a large concentration of the Fortune 500, of which we call our friends, and that we're always utilizing for diligence purposes, as well as helping our startups get that early commercial traction. And then on the flip side, New York ecosystem itself is a burgeoning ecosystem for entrepreneurial talent. We actually release a report every year on the VC financing in the enterprise space, specifically for New York. And I think we had almost $5 billion or over $5 billion in 2020. So despite COVID, it was quite a year. And so we're always keeping our pulse on the New York City enterprise entrepreneurial market. And we're doing everything from community events to different dinners. And obviously this has changed from COVID time, but if you can imagine, building an enterprise startup, it's always helpful to work with like-minded folks that care about go-to-market, that care about enterprise, and that you can commiserate and work with.
Is it what's the mixture like of security companies versus traditional software companies?
So the way that we define enterprise is in 4 key buckets. So data and analytics, infrastructure, security, and then future of work. And then future of work can kind of be considered a catch-all for really enterprise SaaS. For our security investments, I'd say it's about maybe 25%, although I'd say that the way that we've been looking at security investments have really been focused on a couple of angles, and I'm happy to walk through, some of the themes and things that we've been tracking. But on the infrastructure side, on the security side, I'd say that a lot of what we care about are more some of the foundational security technologies. So we're not really looking to get like a massive portfolio trying to identify every single problem, because not everything is has a large enough market. And so we're really looking into areas that have outsized impact, and a lot of those end up being kind of from the infrastructure perspective. So some examples in this case might be on the application security side. We were investors in a company called Semel that was acquired by GitHub. Our big thesis there was obviously the shift from developer responsible security and the ability to put a lot of these security tools in the hands of developers, so that things like productivity as well as security can be boosted. But yeah, I'd say at the end of the day, our portfolio is really is not heavily weighted toward security. It's more heavily weighted, I guess, on the data infrastructure side, but with security really playing really trying to find those more foundational technologies.
So real quickly, Kelley and I have known each other for going on a decade probably now, Kelley. So good to see you. Help me understand. You see pitches constantly, all the time, and some good, and I guarantee you the vast majority of them are like, oh, yet another one. What gets you excited when you hear a pitch from an up and coming company that might be a seed or an early A stage company? What makes you really get interested and get excited outside of the thesis, which I would also love to hear, like looking forward, what are the 2 or 3 things that really has you excited about security or infrastructure investing? But what in particular in a pitch side would make you go, this one's got it?
Yeah, I think that our criteria for investing is on a couple of factors, and obviously there are a lot of smart people out there, and I think definitely whenever I meet anybody, they're always smarter than me, and so I'm always humbled to meet other folks and to hear their ideas. At the end of the day, though, some of the key factors that really play a part is from a team and founder perspective is what is their pedigree and what makes their specific experience unique, whether that be their unique experience of that they were previously a CISO or a security practitioner, and so they understand the intimate details of what that job entails and has empathy for that buyer and has empathy for exactly what type of solution they should be building. Obviously, from that pedigree perspective, it's helpful when the scale of which that you were a practitioner in the past, whether that be at obviously the internet scale companies or at a large bank, helps. And I think that for a team, one of the things that a lot of folks see, and maybe you folks see as well, is that a lot of people do gravitate towards internet scale companies, whether they be Google, whether they be Lyft, Facebook, Uber, et cetera. It's always exciting to see, I guess engineers and different practitioners leave their job and help commercialize some sort of open source project or some sort of method that they were employing there. And I guess the way that is described is Giphy, or Google Infrastructure for Everyone Else, but I guess we can replace Giphy with FANG or whatever the new acronym is. But I think a lot of organizations look to these leading technology companies as I guess instructions on how to do either security or general IT operations or technology operations better. A great example of this is site reliability engineering from Google, or all the different data open source projects that Uber has created. So on one hand, we're looking at team, we're looking at the pedigree, we're looking at what unique experience they have. On the second hand, we're also where we come in, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but we focus, when we say early stage, is really we focus post-product. It can be pre-revenue, but the ability for you to have a product helps us out when we do diligence, because we want to make sure that when we talk to corporates and we talk to practitioners, that there's actually something that they can play with or get a better understanding of, rather than just the concept or an idea. And so from a product perspective, want to see that, well, it's live, but then also what is it about your product that is differentiated than the rest of the market? And I think security is a really interesting market that that in itself is rather saturated. There are a lot of products out there. So it's definitely for the security market, what are you doing necessarily, whether it's from a UI perspective, which actually does matter. I think that security is one of those industries where good UI can go a long way, whether that's better ease of communication between others, collaboration, or generally presentation. I think there's obviously a information overload within security, within a lot of other disciplines, within the technology sphere. So the ability to have a great UI is super beneficial. But then, what other
Kelley,
aspect?
I feel like sometimes we kind of don't give that enough of a priority, because we're not creating necessarily the next Instagram, right? We're not going after the general population of any given country with our products. It's a B2B. And so that prioritization of user interface tends to get pushed down a little bit. But I agree with you. I think it's super important.
Yeah. To that point, I was recently talking to a practitioner who was telling me that I mean, the folks that he's hiring are, 20 to 30 years old. They're Gen Z, millennials, and the expectations that they have is basically that the tools they use should look similar to games, right? That it should be in dark mode, that it should be enjoyable, right? It shouldn't feel like, Archer from a long time ago. It should feel responsive, exactly as a consumer.
Yeah, like my 7-year-old can navigate Fortnite like there's no tomorrow. Like when I have a question about Fortnite, I have to ask my 7-year-old, and he can navigate that like awesome, right?
So I have a personal investment thesis when I'm doing investments, and that thesis is exactly what you said, Kelley, is that I feel like you can disrupt literally any cybersecurity market or sub-market today just by putting a better UI and a better user experience into play. And you can do it on mediocre, or let's call it 80% efficacy of the tool itself. If you have 150% better UI user experience, you can run a market over. It's happened multiple times with some of these up and coming technologies. So I want to ask you real quick, what's the best thing about, you and I were analysts together back in our Forrester days. What's the best thing that you could apply the analyst experience to investing?
Yeah, I think the analyst experience helps out a lot at the end of the day, as I said before, I'm not the smart one. I usually find that I talk to a lot of smart people and I can gather their ideas and I can collect their ideas and form a more general thesis across that. And that's very similar to what we did as analysts, right? We talked to a lot of practitioners, we talked to the vendors, we'd say, hey, the market is going in this direction. And for early stage investing, at seed and Series A, that's basically the job. It's just to say, all right, what do buyers want? What is the core pain point? Where are they putting budget dollars to? And then what technologically is possible from the ecosystem, whether they be, as I mentioned before, you have some really cool things coming out of internet companies, or you just have some really fascinating folks that have had experience, building security products, and they say, hey, we can do this, better. And really just playing matchmaker between the two, right? As I was mentioning before, we have an awesome community here in New York. And one thing that we find super valuable is stress testing a lot of our theses, a lot of our investments against, these practitioners to understand hey, is this a science project or is this, actually applicable to your business? And not only is it applicable, but would it fit from a budget perspective? Because something to keep in mind is that there's a lot of legacy technology. Not everything is a priority. So yes, firmware security is definitely something you should care about, but it's not something that people are going to be investing in every day, especially if it's not core to your business.
So Kelley, give me the one or two companies that you're super excited about that you guys have done some investment in.
Yeah, so one of our recent investments last year hasn't been announced yet, but is a company called Trust. And what they're revolutionizing is the third-party risk space. So I had been spending time in the third-party risk space and identified that, hey, that is a space that's been invested in before in the past. You have audit exchanges, you have security ratings companies, but at the end of the day, organizations are still distributing questionnaires to each other. And these questionnaires are 150 to 200 questions, and everybody gets the same one, and they lack no context. There's no, triaging or prioritization of the types of questions that you ask. You ask everybody the same thing. And what ends up happening is there's a long tail of vendors that you just can't cover because not everybody is able to source, to resource and staff third-party risk. It's not really sexy in itself. And this is an area that is ripe for disruption for automation. The big theme in enterprise in general has been automation. Wherever you have a process, wherever you have manual tasks, why do you need, somebody to necessarily do it? Why can't you have some sort of bot either do some natural language processing to understand contract language, or, just, push different pieces of that process forward without human intervention and really just be able to maximize value. So Visor Trust built a platform to really automate the due diligence process of third-party risk, and super excited about them. So far, they're firing on all cylinders. And then the last one,
So Paul, I think you and I need to collect a bunch of money and invest in that company now on the back of his idea. So
is that your goal behind that question?
Hey, I'm always looking for an angle, baby. You know it.
Let's do it. I'm in.
So real quickly, Kelley, what's without giving company names, what's the one pitch you've heard since you were an investor where you just went, wow, that's no good?
I don't typically have conversations, thankfully, where, I'm unimpressed. It's just that there will be times where I understand that from a market dynamics perspective that, for example, certain data security technologies, whether it's homomorphic encryption, differential privacy, federated learning, they are very interesting technically. It is the application of it can, push industry forward so that, more data analysis can happen, et cetera. But I also understand that it's something that from a technology perspective is not advanced enough that the friction that it provides is not worth the cost. And then
you are so politically correct. You are so politically correct. Look at you dodging me.
Right. So, that's an example of, elements of very cool data security technologies that I think that, we'll listen to the pitch. We'll try to identify, have you any commercial success? But usually the commercial success is limited for certain types of companies. And even within those companies are for use cases that are very, very limited. And so again, from a VC perspective, we need to look broader. And when you think about, VC fundamentals, it ends up being when you construct your portfolio and you invest in companies, it's not really looking for that quick flip. It's looking for those really outsized market opportunities. Yeah. And that's just one of them that.
Kelley, let me ask you this way. What's the worst way you could start your pitch if you were
There it
pitching?
is. That's a good one.
I find that the pitches that are just harder to do end up being ones where the founders are a little maybe too headstrong, where obviously again, everybody's smart and there's always something to learn, but there's an element of, working with when for us in our business, when you make a seed investment or a Series A investment, you're in it for 5 to 7 to sometimes 10 years. And you sometimes have to identify, like, is this a person that I could work with from a coachability perspective, that they can understand the nuance between, yes, your product is very cool technically, but when we go to sell it, there will be, another, basically another muscle that you'll have to learn because you're just, not, that's just like not you.
This explains why Kelley has never invested in me. Exactly why.
Well, before Tyler said that, I was going to say, so when you do your pitch, don't be a cocky a-hole.
Yeah, this is why Kelley has never invested in my
I didn't mean to imply that Tyler was that. I'm just...
Hey, it's the truth. It's the truth.
Well, it seems like that's kind of the style of VC, right? That you are. It seems like you do a lot of coaching. You do a lot of hands-on. With your entrepreneurs.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's your company. The best we can do is guide you we'll give you money and then guide you in the direction that we've seen
that's
others be successful
the best
in.
you could do is give them money, Kelley. That's absolutely the best. The guiding them is second, for sure.
The money definitely helps, but I think you guys have this awesome show, and I know in the beginning you go through all the VC financings, and I know that VC financings have been on a tear recently, and a lot of them you look at and it really makes you raise an eyebrow. And
so that actually brings up a question. No, and I'm not busting your chops on this one, I swear, but do you feel that some of the outsized valuations that are occurring, because they're kind of astronomical right now, and that's okay, like it doesn't matter as long as you get the returns, right? But is that, you think, in effect, a problem coming from some of the macro markets and the valuations that are occurring in the public space?
Yeah, I mean, you had some major IPOs recently, like Snowflake, that shows that, from a forward revenue perspective and those multiples, that, hey, maybe this company, I think you guys are talking about Armis, right? Like maybe Armis is worth more than 2 billion, but today worth 2 billion, and then we can next stage be 4 billion or more within whatever market that they're in. And I think a big symptom of it is that there's just a lot of money in venture, and that venture is burning a hole in a lot of these firms' pockets, whether they're private equity, like larger growth stage firms, or even just multifaceted different stage firms. They have the money, they've raised billion-dollar funds, and they have to deploy that money. And when that money is then deployed, the expectation is that it's not just a $1 billion outcome, it's 10 billion plus.
So Kelley, is it a double unicorn at 2 billion or a duocorn? Which term do you prefer?
I mean, it could be a bicorn, but
bicorn. He came up with his own answer. We have to go with that now. It's a bicorn.
So in case you guys can't tell, I have a great relationship with Kelley. I've worked with him a lot. I try to funnel every deal I see through WorkBench, because he's just one of the nicest VCs on the planet, right?
Yeah. Kelley, we're sorry that you had to put up with that for all that time.
No, Tyler's great. I had an awesome experience working with Tyler. I learned a lot from him. So, the least I could do is give him some time.
Go ahead, Paul. Or
Adrian.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you would be comfortable if we did just kind of a quick rapid fire question game.
Sure.
Oh boy.
Where I
hope I can think quick enough, but yes.
Well, so I mean it's in your favor because all my questions are about your portfolio companies. But kind of borrowing off our first segment, the news segment, we were talking about how hard it is to understand what a company is doing from some of these press releases. Right. I think it would be fun to ask you some quick questions and see if you could give me, elevator pitch, short, concise answers.
Sure. Yeah. Like a TLDR or a one-liner that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and they're legitimate questions. I've been looking at some of your portfolios as we've been talking, and that's where my questions are coming from. So the first one is what is ML ops and how does it relate to what Algorithmia does? Yeah.
So large organizations, you are building models, and usually those models are built in data science by data science teams, and usually after that data science team builds that model, they pass it off to the IT department to run on their servers, whether that be in VMware or in virtual machines, or if you're running it in the cloud. And just that handoff and then actually serving that model on infrastructure, maximizing its efficiency is just tough to do. And a lot of it is just due to that handoff, plus not really knowing exactly what the model itself is trying to maximize for. And so what Algorithmia does is provides a platform for specifically productionizing that model.
So the workflow between teams to hand all that off.
Exactly.
Between data scientists and ops, right, Kelley?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard of those struggles before. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool. Now, you talked about VSO Trust a lot, and I that's the one I'm most interested in. I've had to deal with a lot of third-party questionnaires on both on many different sides. I worked for vendors for the last couple of years, and 100% with you. It is such a huge and painful problem. There are so many vendors up late nights trying to finish some of these vendor questionnaires so they can get these sales to close. But if you could just give me kind of more of the high level pitch for this. I'm not sure if it's just managing the questionnaires or if there's more to it. And I guess my real question is, with all the SIG templates and RFPs out there, like the biggest problem seems to me, and here I am breaking my own game by not being concise with the question, but
no worries.
Like everybody wants to have their own set of questions. So how can you solve that problem? Does this have some way of addressing that?
Yeah, actually, so to your point, what they initially do is help out with that back and forth of the questionnaire. They do that digitally through their platform. But one element that I'm very excited about that they have is called document intelligence. So let's say you are a vendor, and you have a SOC 2 audit report, or you might have or you might have, maybe answered a questionnaire for another vendor. And you can actually drop in that document, and it'll pre-populate the document that you're going to answer just through understanding of like what is actually needed to be answered, but understanding like what you've already answered before in the past. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
So to your point, I mean, there's a lack of standardization in the market for sure, but if you've already answered it somewhere, from an operational, the least thing you can do is just like say, oh, if you already answered it before, like, let's take it from a document where you said that.
Exactly.
I think
we would just
actually
sheets, and it was so painful.
It's an interesting challenge, which is something that they'll tackle. But if you've been on the enterprise side, sometimes even they know that they ask the same question 3 different times with different language, and that's where the fun begins. Where it's like, well, maybe even for the enterprises themselves, when they're rebuilding the questionnaire, they can start to nix 5 or 6 of them, because it's like answering the same. It's going to get the same value that you want it to in the end.
All right, so fire hydrant, elevator pitch.
Yeah, so Fire Hydrant it's a platform for site reliability engineers. It provides basically the incident response platform where an alert goes off from pager duty. You jump in it, you create war rooms. It allows you to identify which service is impacted. It'll basically allow you to communicate amongst each other in Slack, create postmortems, run runbooks that are automated based off of the types of incidents, and then create retrospectives on exactly what happened, so that you can not have it happen again in the future.
That looks awesome. It looks like something I'd love to play with.
There you go. You got to get a briefing, Adrian.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll be.
Anybody else? Anybody else have some questions for him on portfolio?
What's your biggest portfolio exit that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, we're still a small company. Well, I mean, we're still a young firm. We've been around for 8 years. Venture is a long business. We're currently in our 2nd fund, but we've had some some exits from our portfolio include CoreOS to Red Hat, Semel, as I mentioned, to GitHub. Actually, one of our companies recently, Datalog, just got acquired by Nike, which is pretty cool. But what we're also really excited for is that, enterprise investing is a long game, and we have a couple of unicorns in our portfolio as well, like Cockroach Labs, Dialpad. Maybe those are the 2, and then some unannounced.
I love that. I love that branding
soon,
though. That's the boldest branding, Cockroach Labs. And they just really dive into it. You're like, really? You want to go with that name? And then you start reading about it.
And they own
Scale
it.
fast, survive anything, thrive everywhere. You're like, okay, no, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, there's a big trend of, hey, does Google do it? If so, maybe other people can use it. And so what they built is, Cockroach Labs is based off of Spanner, which is the distributed SQL database that Google uses. And the engineers had worked previously on Spanner, and is basically building a Spanner for everyone else.
That's cool. But I like unique names where the company really just owns it, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be survivable, and the company is based in New York, so we have our fair share of cockroaches.
There's a California-based company. They make awesome audio gear actually, and the name of it is Shit. SCHIIT. Their gear is awesome. And when you read their website and their product descriptions and FAQs, they totally own it. I mean, they own it all day long.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I was actually just looking into those. Didn't end up buying it, but the Shit stack, yeah, that's a standard, right?
I have 3 Shit stacks actually. One of them actually is a pretty big shit stack.
I thought they were small shits. I didn't realize how big.
Yeah, they have the little shit stacks. Bigger shit.
as opposed to a stack of shit. You don't want that.
Right. You don't want that. Well,
Right.
depends on if you mean the audio
Wow.
company. Yes. SCHIIT. Give them a free plug because I do like their gear. Awesome. Any more questions for Kelley? This was way too much fun. Kelley, we have to bring you back regularly.
I'm happy to
Appreciate
come back whenever you want.
That'd be fun. Yeah, I was just thinking it would be the hesitation there was it would be fun to have you come on if we have especially a week where we've got lots of acquisitions, funding rounds, and IPOs happening in a given week to kind of help us with some of that analysis. Because I mean, some weeks we have this week I think we had 1 or 2. Other weeks we may have 6 or more. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, Kelley, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
With that, we will conclude today's show. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.